His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki, ISKCON NJP Prabhupada Ki, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki, Shri Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Devi Ki, Shri Shri Nitai Gaura Sundari Ki, Sankirtan Yajna Ki, Gaur all glories to this noble devotee. All glories to this noble devotee. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Sri Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. How nice to be here with you all. I hope everyone's okay. Hope everyone's happy in Krishna consciousness. So devotees, as Prabhu just told us, we are going to do a short overview of the third chapter of Bhagavad Gita, which is an interesting chapter, very relevant chapter actually of Bhagavad Gita. Who could put their hand up first and not just shout it out, but put their hand up and tell me, what is the name of chapter 3? Everyone except Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, because he knows. Mataji. Karma. Good work. Yes, right. Okay, so repeat after me, please. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Yes, so devotees, you know, I could make a suggestion to you, seeing as Prabhu said, here, I think every Sunday, we're going to be looking at one chapter or so of Bhagavad Gita, one after the other, and just going through the whole Bhagavad Gita. And Bhagavad Gita, of course, is our main scripture, particularly in terms of it's just our main scripture, really. Particularly for the beginning of Krishna consciousness. It's just so vital and so wonderful. You know, Bhagavad Gita, the whole Bhagavad Gita, I remember reading it back in early 1973, when I had just moved into the temple in London, and I started, after some days or a couple of weeks, I started reading Bhagavad Gita. Everyone said I must read it, so okay, I started, and it didn't take so long for me, I don't know, a few weeks or so, and I finished Bhagavad Gita, and at the end, I think you would all be well aware, Krishna says that we must surrender to Him. Sarvadharma Parityajya, Malikam Sharanam Vraja, Aham Tvam Sarva Papebhyo, Mokshaya Shanimashyaha. abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me, and I'll deliver you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. So I remember reading that. It's just right at the end, almost the last verse actually, and having just read steadily through it, so I was sort of keeping the flow of the discussion there in mind all the time. That I read that we should all surrender, and I remember very clearly thinking, well, yes, I better surrender then. I must surrender to Krishna. And I'm trying to do that. So, if we're able to go through it systematically like that, from beginning to end, and really note how the discussion develops, because it's a whole developing discussion. Krishna is saying different things. Arjuna is sometimes objecting or challenging a bit like that. And Lord Krishna is answering those objections, and then developing it further and further. It's really, if one follows it all the way through, it's really quite an amazing experience. So my suggestion is that next Sunday we assume you'll go on to chapter 4, which is another very interesting chapter. And why not at least bring your Bhagavad Gita with you? Because I think you all have Bhagavad Gita, maybe a few copies even, at home. Bring it with you so you can really follow it and just see what's what. And even bring a pen and some, like a little notebook or something, so you can take some notes. Because you know what? They say, they means the people who, like experts on seminars and how seminars develop the themes which are there to be discussed at the seminar. You know what they say? They say, if you just hear it, and that's all, then you may retain, you also may not, but you may retain up to like 7% or something like that. Not so much. But if you take notes and write it down, following, the development of the subject matter, then they say you may retain up to 50%. So it's a huge jump. The impact that taking notes and absorbing yourself more like that, the impact that has on you. And then they say that if having done that, having taken your notes carefully and systematically and nicely, if then you go over them regularly from time to time, they say you may retain something like 93%. I mean, a little may slip through the floorboards here and there, but you can retain the great majority of the subject matter. And even, I've had the experience, I can just tell you, of attending a seminar given by His Holiness Giriraj Swami up in the Drakensberg somewhere, quite some years ago, I'd say 20 years ago anyway, quite some years ago. And I did that. I was like frantically taking notes, because my idea was that shortly after, when I was going to be study elsewhere, I would try and present the same seminar. And I did. And it really worked. It really worked. I was able to present, not exactly verbatim, but, really substantially the same seminar, which was a very good seminar. So anyway, that's my suggestion. I leave it with you, because Prabhupada wanted us to study Krishna consciousness like students and learn it like students do when they're studying, and then really take it in and take it to heart. Another thing they told me when I first joined, if you read Bhagavad Gita 27 times, it becomes part of you. That's deep. That's very deep. It really starts pervading you and your heart and your mind. Shri, Shri, Jagannatha, Shri, Shri, and you just start sort of emanating it. So there's some thoughts you can think about. And I'm really trying to do that, because we're not just trying to entertain you. We're trying to educate. Krishna consciousness is an educational process. So, first of all, the very first thing I'll do is read what it's a paragraph, actually, from, I think it's the whole purport of chapter 3, verse 43, which is the last verse of the chapter. I think it's the entire purport. And it's a summary. It summarizes the whole chapter. So, Prabhupada says, this third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is conclusively directive to Krishna consciousness by knowing oneself as the eternal servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, without considering impersonal voidness the ultimate end. In the material existence of life, one is certainly influenced by propensities for lust and desire for dominating the resources of material nature. Desire for overlording and for sense gratification is the greatest enemy of the conditioned soul. But by the strength of Krishna consciousness, one can control the material senses, the mind, and the intelligence. One may not give up work and prescribe duties all of a sudden, but by gradually developing Krishna consciousness, one can be situated in a transcendental position without being influenced by the material senses and the mind, by steady intelligence directed toward one's pure identity. This is the sum total of this chapter. In the immature stage of material existence, philosophical speculations and artificial attempts to control the senses by the so-called practice of yogic postures can never help a man towards spiritual life. He must be trained in Krishna consciousness by higher intelligence. So as Prabhupada said, this is the sum total of this chapter. And if you get into studying Bhagavad Gita and just really getting into it, you'll see every single chapter has a little summary somewhere in the course of the chapter. In this case, it's the last verse. In some cases, it's the first verse, or just somewhere in the middle or somewhere. And that's very helpful. So devotees, When we teach this Bhagavad Gita seminar as what we call an overview, overview can mean, and I've done it, I've taught it many times, a chapter a day. I mean, not a whole day, but a chapter in an hour. Just an abbreviated version of the chapter. It really helps to get the flow of it all. So when we do that, we have divided this chapter into 5 sections. The first section is verses 1 and 2, which we call confusion, renunciation, or work. And the second section is verse 3 to verse 9. Fight. Do your duty without attachment. And the third section is from verse 10 to verse 16. From karma kanda to karma yoga. Then the fourth section is from verse 17 to verse 32. Act in nishkam karma yoga to set a correct example. And last section, from verse 36 to verse 43, beware of lust and anger. So there you go, devotees. So let's go through it. So the first section we said was, it's from verses 1 and 2. Can anyone remember what we called that that section? Can you remember? Sorry? Confusion. And then renunciation of work. Or renunciation or work. Thank you. You see, if you just hear, if I ask everyone, if your life depended on it, and I ask you, write down what we have called this first little section, and if you can't do it, you'll die. Immediately, we have a lot of dead people around. Dead devotees. I'm sure you'll go back to God here. But anyway, okay, so the first one, confusion. Arjuna is confused. Should I renounce and just sort of do nothing, basically? Or should I work? Because in the second chapter, if you remember from last week, if it was last week, or it was last week, yeah? If you remember from last week, Lord Krishna was particularly emphasizing, I mean, not the only thing he talked about, but there was particular emphasis that don't just be part of the material world. Don't identify with the body. Get out of bodily attachments. So therefore, at the end of that chapter 2, and right here at the beginning of chapter 3, Arjuna, you wouldn't blame him for thinking that, well, sounds like I've just got to renounce everything and just sit down, and I don't know what I'll do, but I'll sit down. Yeah, and be detached. And just think about, I'll be detached from this, and I'll be detached from that, and I'll be detached from him. I'll be detached from the phone, and I'll just be detached. I'll just be detached. That's what I'll do. So you couldn't blame Arjuna for thinking like that after having gone through the second chapter, because Arjuna's putting, more than pretty much anything else, at least at that stage, is emphasizing this point. That first thing, you are not your body. none of us are our bodies. But we've got this tendency to think we are these bodies, but we've got to get out of that from the outset. So therefore, renunciation of things to do with the body. Yes, okay, so then, the second section, well, let me just, I can read a verse to you, I think, yeah. So verse 1, Arjuna said, O Janardana, O Keshava, why do you want me to engage in this ghastly warfare if you think that intelligence means like understanding you're not your body and how you're not your body? If you think that intelligence is better than fruit of work, my intelligence is bewildered by your equivocal instructions. Therefore, please tell me decisively which will be most beneficial for me. Equivocal, it means equivocal, equally voiced. It sounds like you're recommending detachment, and maybe it sounds like you could be recommending working in a particular way, equivocal. Your equivocal instructions, I'm confused. So then, the third section is verse 3 to verse 9. Fight. Do your duty without attachment. It's like a combination. You've got to do your duty, and we'll tell you a verse or two from this section to that effect. But you've got to fight in a detached way. So it's like a combination. Yeah. You've got to do your duty, and you've got to be detached at the same time. So it's like a balance of the two. But of course, for us, we shouldn't fight. I mean, I'm looking at our men. Other than Raj Prabhu, I don't know if anyone here is really warrior material. Any of you with the surname Singh, because that means you come from like a warrior background. Many generations ago, I think. Okay, so whatever your duty is, do it, but in a detached way, not with attachment. How can I enjoy it? And what am I going to get out of it? What's in it for me? Actually, the essence of that detachment is you do it for Krishna. It's all for him. And in that way, you are detached. And like I said, there's a verse, at least one I'll tell you. So here, this is verse 4. Lord Krishna says, not by merely abstaining from work can one achieve freedom from reaction, nor by renunciation alone can one attain perfection. So you see, Krishna is coming out on the side of you've got to work, you've got to be engaged in activity, doing something useful, but in a detached spirit, means doing it for Krishna and not for you. And verse 5 is a very interesting, very important one. Note it down if you've got something to note it on. We've all got telephones, right? I suppose. This is a very important one. Listen to this. Everyone is forced to act helplessly according to the qualities he's acquired from the modes of material nature. Therefore, no one can refrain from doing something, not even for a moment. Yeah, this is very emphatic instruction from Lord Krishna. It's very clear that because we've got these bodies, and these bodies are just, they're full of the modes. Therefore, you can't really stop yourself from acting. The Prabhupada told 2 stories about this principle. One was the story of the scorpion and the horse. You know that story? You know that story? The scorpion and the horse. The scorpion and the horse, separate from each other, they came to the banks of the river, and both of them wanted to cross, but the scorpion is just, a small creature, and of course the horse is much, much bigger. So the scorpion said, could you please give me a lift? You're going across, I need to go across. Could I ride on your back? And the horse said, no, you're a scorpion. You'll sting me. Because, we all know what it's like to be stung by a mosquito, maybe even by a bee or a wasp. It's not nice. But a scorpion, I don't know if any of you have been stung by a scorpion, you may not survive. It's very extreme. So the horse said, no, forget it. And the scorpion, you may sting me, you may bite me. And the scorpion said, no, why would I do that? If you're helping me cross the river, of course I won't do that. So the horse reluctantly agreed. They are going across. They're almost at the other side, but suddenly, bang! The scorpion stung the horse. And the horse said, what did you do that for? You promised not to do that. And the scorpion said, I know, I'm so sorry, I couldn't help myself. It's my nature. That's one story. And Prabhupada told another story that there was a group of devotees going on a pilgrimage somewhere in India by foot, back in the old days. And one of them was a new devotee who had been a thief. He'd been like a petty thief type, not a big murderer or something, but he would steal things. So everyone's sleeping at night, but the thief, he couldn't sleep. He got up and he went over and looked at all the belongings with the bags the other devotees had, and he picked them up. But he didn't run off with them, he just moved them. This person's bag, he put by that person's bag, but by that other person. And that other person, he took his bag and put it by one of the others. You get the idea? So they all woke up in the morning. Said, what happened? Where's my bag? Where's my bag? And then they said, hey, you've got my bag. What? You took my bag. And the other one said, no, I didn't take your bag. You've got my bag. And then the thief said, I just couldn't stop myself. But at least I didn't take them all. I just moved them around. Because it's my nature. I just do things like that. So that's what Krishna is saying, that every conditioned soul has their nature. And, whatever it may be. So Krishna consciousness means not that you just stop doing everything, but depending on what your nature is, you try and engage that in Krishna's service. So like if you're a teacher, that's what you do and what you're used to doing, you can teach Krishna consciousness. Like the ladies generally are very good cooks. They can cook for Krishna, and so on and so forth, all this sort of thing. Because otherwise it will not be good for you if you just try and stop and just sit down and just do nothing. Yeah, so therefore Krishna is really advocating and insisting that you have to act. And he says, I can't go through the whole thing, the whole chapter in detail. But verse 8, perform your prescribed duty, for doing so is better than not working. One cannot even maintain one's physical body without work. And then verse 9, the last verse of the section, work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed. Otherwise, work causes bondage in this material world. Therefore, O son of Kunti, that's Arjuna, perform your prescribed duties for his satisfaction. And in that way, you will always remain free from bondage. Yeah. So you have to work. Do what you normally do, generally, but do it as a service for the Lord. Otherwise, even like if you're a housewife at home and you're cooking every day for the family, but if you're cooking things which are unofferable, which is the case, of course, of so many housewives, then, well, you get karmic reactions. But even if you're vegetarian, but you're not cooking for Krishna, you'll also get reactions. More on that is coming. Yes, okay, so the next section is from verse 10 to 16, and we call that From Karma Kandya to Karma Yoga. Yes. So, this is interesting. Karma Kandya generally is the term we apply to the practice of demigod worship. Demigod worship means that you worship some particular deity in order to get something material. Like you worship Lakshmi, Devi, to get money. It's very common. Like in the Govardhan Leela, then Krishna's father and his friends, every year they would do the Indra Yajna, because Indra supplies rain, and they're farming people, and when you're farming you need rain. So this was their practice, but it was demigod worship, it was karma kandya. It was not actually Krishna conscious. So therefore Krishna convinced them, don't do that. And so they stopped the Indra Yajna. You know that story. And they offered everything to go the downhill, which is a form of the Lord. Yes, so let's just have a look in Bhagavad Gita, a verse or two. Interesting point. The first verse 10, Krishna says, in the beginning of creation, the Lord of all creatures sent forth generations of men and demigods, along with sacrifices for Vishnu, and blessed them by saying, be thou happy by this yajna, sacrifice, because its performance will bestow upon you everything desirable for living happily and achieving liberation. Means this whole material world is designed and engineered and actually created for sacrifice. Everything which is here is specifically designed to be used in sacrifice. Of course, many people think that everything that's here is for our enjoyment. It's not the right idea. It's the wrong idea. It's all for sacrifice. Then Krishna talks a bit about the demigods. In verse 11, the demigods being pleased by sacrifice will also please you. And thus by cooperation between men and demigods, prosperity will reign for all. Like if you're in India and it's sometime around, I think it's around Kartik time, is Saraswati Puja. Saraswati is the Virgin Learning. So you get all these little school children going around asking for donations for Saraswati Puja, because they're all school children and they've got to learn. So they're worshipping Saraswati. Yes, okay. And verse 13 is very interesting and important. The devotees of the Lord are released from all kinds of sins because they eat food which is offered first for sacrifice. Others who prepare food for personal sense enjoyment verily eat only sin. So in other words, we have to offer everything we eat. We shouldn't eat anything which has not been offered. And you know, if you're working and you're out away somewhere and you have to go to a shop and buy something vegetarian, well, what are you going to do? How are you going to offer it? You haven't got an altar with you. So there are ways you can offer, like an apple, for example, just out in the street. There are ways you can do it. Yeah, it's not difficult. In this way, you can eat prasadam. Back in the good old days when Prabhupada was here, some devotees, particularly in Germany, they had the bright idea that rather than just buy an apple or a couple of pieces of fruit or something and offer that, why not offer the whole shop? And everyone will be taking prasadam. So they did that. And then they thought, you know, we're drinking water. Why don't we just offer the whole water reservoir, the city water supply? So they went up and they offered that, supposedly. And when Prabhupada heard about that, he said, no, don't do that. Just, you know, if you're going to have an orange, an apple and a banana or something, just offer that. You can do that. But we should always eat food. We should only eat food which has been offered. Even if something is very vegetarian, pure vegetarian, but it hasn't been offered, and you can't offer it, don't offer it. I mean, don't eat it. Don't eat it, yeah. You know, when Prabhupada did, I think he did 2 programs in the Durban town hall. In one of them, there was a man there from Stanton named Narayan Singh. Some of you might have heard of the family, a very prominent family to this day out there. Mr. Narayan Singh was a vegetarian activist. He was like staunch vegetarian, and he would had little things printed and distributed them about being vegetarian. So in that program, Prabhupada asked some questions, and this man got up and said, can you say something about being vegetarian? And Prabhupada said, it is not very important. The main thing is that you offer what you're going to eat. Yeah. Prabhupada could immediately tell this man has his agenda. Okay, so let's continue on. So, the next section is from verse 17 to verse 32. We call it Nishkan Karma Yoga, which Karma Yoga, that's the title of the chapter. Karma in this context means your prescribed duty. For Arjuna, it means he's a warrior. That's his prescribed duty. You everyone has their prescribed duty of some sort. So, that's your karma. But karma yoga means connecting, linking it with the Lord. So karma yoga means doing your duty, but for the Lord. So that's what this is about. And nishkar means without selfish desire. And the idea, what Krishna presents here is that he, Krishna, he does his duty in a renounced spirit himself, even though he doesn't have to, because he's God. And God doesn't have to do all these things we have to do. God is like permanently liberated. But we need to do these things, perform our duty as a service to the Lord. We need to do that. But Krishna doesn't, even though he doesn't need to do it. Yeah, Krishna, when he was living as in the cowherd community, he herded the cows. When he was living in the Kshatriya community, he was prince in Mathura and then prince in Dwarka. So he was doing Kshatriya duties. He was fighting with demons all the time, every day. Although he has no duty to do. He's independent of these ideas. So, but he still does it. Why does he do it? To set an example for people like us. Otherwise, we may use it as an excuse. Look, Krishna, he was herding the cows, but sometimes he would kill demons. And sometimes he would dance with the gopis. These are not like his natural duties because he's a cowherd. So I may have my duty, but I don't need to do it all the time. I can just dream up something I'd like to do later. And just do it if I feel like it, because Krishna did it. So Krishna says, let's see, this is verse 20, kings such as Janaka attain perfection solely by performance of prescribed duties. Therefore, just for the sake of educating the people in general, you should perform your work. You may think you're liberated, you don't have to follow these, do your duties. But even if you are liberated, still you should do your duty to set a good example. And Krishna himself says, whatever action, this is 21, whatever action a great man performs, common men follow. And whatever standards he sets by exemplary acts, all the world pursues. And then Krishna says, O son of Pritha, there is no work prescribed for me within all the three planetary systems. Nor am I in want of anything, nor have I a need to obtain anything, and yet I am engaged in prescribed duties. Different duties at different times, but still Krishna performed certain duties. If I ever fail to engage in prescribed duties, certainly all men would follow my path. If I did not perform prescribed duties, all these worlds would be put to ruination. I would be the cause of creating unwanted population, and I would thereby destroy the peace of all living entities. So as not to disrupt the minds of ignorant men attached to the fruit of results of prescribed duties, a learned person should not induce them to stop work. Rather, by working in the spirit of devotion, he should engage them in all sorts of activities for the development of Krishna consciousness. You get the idea? Even if you think you're liberated, you should still perform prescribed duties. Yeah. Because if you don't, particularly if you're in a leading position, if you're prominent, and people see that, oh, you're meant to be doing this, but now you're doing something else, you'll throw the whole social system out. So therefore, Krishna says, even though I have no prescribed duty, I still perform prescribed duties to keep like a balance in human society. So, okay, we're motoring along, devotees. Yes. Well, let me just read the purport to verse 30. Well, let me just tell you what verse 30 is. Therefore, O Arjuna, surrendering all your works unto me, in other words, doing everything that you normally do, but doing it for me, with full knowledge of me, without desire for profit, in other words, detached from your own personal interest, with no claims to proprietorship, and free from lethargy, fight. When Prabhupada says in the purport, this verse clearly indicates the purpose of the Bhagavad Gita. The Lord instructs that one has to become fully Krishna conscious to discharge duties as if in military discipline. In other words, very strictly, such an injunction may make things a little difficult. Nevertheless, duties must be carried out with dependence on Krishna, because that is the constitutional position of the living entity. So what are our prescribed duties? Well, whatever your work is you can accept that as a prescribed duty. But there's a second sort of aspect of prescribed duty, and that is whatever your service in Krishna consciousness is. It may be different from your work. The work you do to maintain your family, but your service, particularly if it's given to you by the spiritual master personally, that's very serious prescribed duty, and you must do that. Yes, okay. Right. So, the last section is verse 36 to verse 43. And it's a warning. Beware of lust and anger. I mean, sort of a slight change of subject. But it's important, because you may be doing your duty, but while you're doing your duty, desires may come up. You may see an attractive member of the opposite sex and think, oh, looks interesting, and maybe try to pursue her or him. Even maybe if you're already married, it happens sometimes. Yeah. So Arjuna is wondering, what is it that makes us do that? Get attracted to some things we shouldn't be attracted to. Yeah. So Krishna says, it is lust only, Arjuna, which is born of contact with the material mode of passion, and later transformed into wrath or anger, and which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. So the thing is, we've been in this world a long time. We don't know, we have no idea. But very long, we don't know how long. And certain habits are deeply ingrained into us. And these habits are being attracted to certain things, like the opposite sex, and other things also. they are deeply ingrained. One devotee said to Srila Prabhupada, and anyway, I'll just mention it, that Srila Prabhupada, now that I'm practicing Krishna consciousness, I have no attraction to the opposite sex. So it's wonderful. And Prabhupada said, oh, there's something wrong with you. That would not be considered appropriate, actually, under current social circumstances. So I apologize if it offends anyone. Yeah, but in principle, it's like that. We've got these deeply ingrained habits, and they can just sort of come up almost like any time and distract you from your Krishna consciousness. So Krishna goes on for the rest of the chapter, basically, to just explain how it works. This was 38. As fire is covered by smoke, as a mirror is covered by dust, or as the embryo is covered by the womb, the living entity is similarly covered by different degrees of this lust. Yeah, it depends. Yeah, how strong. In some it's less strong, in others it's more strong, in some it's incredibly strong. It's just a question of degree of lust. And in this way, the living entity, the pure nature of the living entity is covered over, basically, by, Krishna says, his eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and which burns like fire. Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Devi Shri Nitai Gaura Sundara Ki Jaya. Just a sec. Let me just read the translation of the last verse to conclude. Thus, knowing oneself to be transcendental to the material senses, mind, and intelligence, O mighty Arjuna, one should steady the mind by deliberate spiritual intelligence, Krishna consciousness, and thus, by spiritual strength, conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust, which will try and lust will try and interfere with your engagement in your duties, which you're doing as an offering for the Lord. Karma Yoga. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ramzaraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita. So I think that's it. Sorry. Someone was trying to say something.
His Holiness Bhakti Chaitanya Swami Maharaj Ki. So thank you, Maharaj, for a wonderful class. And we hope to see devotees here next week for the continuation of the fourth chapter. So we have a few announcements. On the 16th of June On the 16th of June is Youth Day, and we will continue with chapter 4.